Hello, Emmanuel Lyson coming to you with another edition of Financial Breakthrough Academy. I hope you've had a wonderful day. We are going to continue on our session working on building a financial profile and focusing today what I call determining your financial risk or your risk tolerance. Uh, what do you need to be able to determine the risk tolerance you have for any kind of investment you be doing? Okay, so let's get on a few important things here. First of all, we want to look at there's a scripture we've been addressing all this week. I think it's very critical. Again, our subject today is determining your risk tolerance. Determining your risk tolerance. And let me take us to one of the scriptures we've been holding on this week on this particular subject. In Luke chapter 14, verse 28 tells us that for which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost whether he has enough to finish it. In other words, being able to assess one's risk tolerance, determining your risk tolerance, and making sure that whatever you are beginning, you are able to complete and achieve your goals is an important spiritual concept, but applicable to the world of finance. So again, we are talking today on the subject determining your risk tolerance, and it's important that we understand, even as we work on building our wealth, building our financial strength, that we have an understanding of what it takes to do that. So let's take a look at a basic definition of what is risk tolerance. How do we, I say, define risk tolerance? By definition, risk tolerance is the extent to which an investor is comfortable with the risk of losing on an investment. I believe yesterday when we talked about building your financial profile, we touched on this particular factor as one important factor amongst about five of them that we gave. So your risk tolerance is an important element in your overall financial profile. Is that right? So we are focusing today on how do you determine your risk tolerance. By definition, again, just like playing chess, how you see when to move, when not to move, when to position yourself strategically in your investment journey. So by definition, again, risk tolerance is simply the extent to which an investor is comfortable with the risk of losing on an investment. I believe we all know by now that there is no investment that is 100%, I would say, proof against any kind of loss. Any investment is subject to some loss of a kind. Is that right? Now, we repeat on this education sessions here. Our goal is to provide content, educational content that you can be able to help you enlarge and expand your information knowledge base on finance. Anytime you want to actually implement these ideas, we recommend to sit down with a tax professional, a financial professional, or a legal counsel to give you a full spectrum of what it takes so you can be well advised in your implementation. So please make sure you are working with a professional when you are trying to implement any idea here that we teach on this sessions. So let's look at the question of how do you determine your risk tolerance. One of the easiest way to go about this is simply to answer or take a risk tolerance questionnaire and be able to answer some questions that it may provide. By virtue of answering those questions, you'll be able to come to a realization of what your level of risk tolerance may be. Is that right? So to be able to determine your risk tolerance, one of the easiest way to do that, whenever you're working for a financial professional of a kind or a legal counsel, you may be asked to answer some questions on a sample questionnaire that will help you determine what your risk profile is. So what I want to do today is to give us a few sample questions that you may use or you may be asked to fill out or respond to when you want to determine what your risk tolerance is. So you may be in the process of looking to invest in something. Okay, perhaps you're planning on investing on in some kind of a real estate. You may be desiring to invest in a business. Perhaps you want to invest in the financial markets directly, or you're perhaps looking forward to buying somebody's business, or maybe starting a project back home. It doesn't matter what you are trying to invest in. I hope in some of our previous sections we have talked about the importance of investment, by which it will help us in the long run to build asset, build equity, and build value for the resources that we have. We talked in the past before that there are basically three ways that we all use money. Is that right? We either spend it for short-term needs. Is that right? The first way we use money is to spend it. The second possible way is to save some of it, mostly for emergencies. And we've talked over the past the need to save at least 3 to 6 months of our income in some kind of an emergency fund. And the third way that we'll perhaps use any finance we have and money is to sow, in other words, invest. So is that particular aspect of investment that whenever we want to invest, the goal being that we want to build our financial capacity or resources, there are risks that will be involved in this. All right. So the goal here is to give us some insight on some of the things we could be doing to help us mitigate the risks in any kind of investment. It doesn't matter the form of investment or vehicle that you are using, there's a risk to it. So to be able to achieve that, you want to analyze or determine your risk tolerance. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we could be doing in trying to determine our risk tolerance. A few sample questions. I'm going to give us 5 sample questions that will show us what we could be doing to understand our risk tolerance. So the first will be a simple question as, what is your age? Is that right? How old are you? It's very simple. Everyone, can answer that question. Maybe 35 or above, whatever, 36 to 54. It doesn't matter the range, but you may be asked to identify or answer what your ages or age range is. Okay, that's a sample question you may encounter when you are trying to determine your risk tolerance. Another question may be simply, what do you expect to be your next major expenditure? Okay, what is your expected next major expenditure? And all of us have different kind of expenditures that we may be looking forward to undertake. Your answer could range anywhere from maybe buying a house, could be an example, perhaps paying for college education for your kids. I mean, some of us have kids about to go to college. It could be a big major expense that you expect to have. Perhaps you may be looking forward to capitalize a new business. That's another possible major expenditure, or providing for retirement. So these are sample answers that you may be asked to select in the process of answering a questionnaire with a sample question. What do you expect to be your next major expenditure? I bet all of us may identify one of these 4 expenses to be one of the major expenses we hope to be taking over the next several years to come. Is that right? So financial analysis of any kind, when we are trying to determine what our risk tolerance is, will come to a place where a sample question may be simply, what is our expected major expenditure? In fact, this applies to almost every aspect of life, including ministry. A lot of times when we ministry, we undertake big projects. Perhaps we need to move to a big building or build a new sanctuary, or perhaps start a new mission work or something that we are trying to undertake. Is that right? and that particular expenditure could factor into the risk tolerance that the ministry will have at that particular time in application in that direction. So for us as individuals or families, we'll be asked the question, what do we expect to be our major expenditure to come soon? So that's one sample question. The next sample question will be simply, uh, what do you expect to use most of your money you are now accumulating in your next investment? Or when you expect to use most of the money you're accumulating. So the whole idea here is to find out what time frame is all right. Are you expecting to use the resources you are accumulating at any particular time in your investment? So the sample question is very, very straightforward. When do you expect to use most of the money you are now accumulating in your next investment? And some of the answers could range anything from, well, I perhaps need to use it, anytime soon, which means that we want our resources to have very high liquidity, ability to access it anytime we need it right away. Is that right? Okay. It could also be simply the fact that we probably need it for maybe the next, 2 to 5 years from now. We want to be able to have access to the money. That's one possible answer to that question. We could also say, well, we perhaps need it within the next 6 to 10 years, or potentially even for a much longer time period, perhaps 11 to 20 years or more from now. So the idea here is that whatever our particular response will be to this question is basically answering what is the time frame, what time frame do we have when it comes to being able to use the funds we have accumulated in our investment. So again, we are trying to determine what is our risk tolerance in any kind of investment we undertake. It doesn't matter. Again, whether you are buying a business, you are investing in some real estate, you are trying to get into the financial markets directly, or maybe you want to invest in a small business that is coming up in a community, perhaps somebody starting, who knows what, a coffee shop or something, and you want to, be a partaker in that investment. So, in doing so, you want to consider your risk tolerance. And one question, sample question in evaluating that will be simply, what do you expect or when do you expect to use most of the money you have now in your investment? It helps you to identify that. So let's go to the next question. Again, I'm giving just about 5 sample questions in this session to give us an idea what to expect. The next possible question will be simply, over the next several years, you expect your income to be so and so. Is that right? So the question is simply determining to what degree is your income going to change over the next several years. Perhaps your annual income, you expect maybe A, to stay about the same, B, maybe you expect it to grow moderately, or perhaps C, you want it to grow substantially. Okay, you perhaps maybe going to graduate or earn a new certificate or something in it, some kind of a field, so you expect your income to grow substantially. Or maybe on the flip side, you may be expecting a potential decrease, moderately, in your income, either because you have to devote some time to do something different, perhaps in a ministry, or your family, your wife maybe is giving birth or something, so income may reduce in the family. That's a possibility. Or it says here, maybe you're going to have a decrease substantially in your income. So in this particular question, the idea is to determine how much of your income is going to be still around over the next several years. Is it going to be substantially increasing, moderately increasing, or staying about the same, or perhaps decreasing? So that's a fourth sample question that you may encounter when determining your risk tolerance for any kind of investment. Let's look at one more question here, and this one is pretty interesting. What this sample question is asking is, it says, assume you just reached the 10,000 plateau on a TV game show. Now you must choose between quitting with the 10,000 in hand or betting the entire 10,000 on in one of the three alternative scenarios. What do you choose? Now, we are not advocating gambling or anything like that. This is an example question to stay our imagination on what our risk tolerance is. Now, most of us watch a lot of these TV shows whereby, they are playing a game and at some point they have an opportunity to use the money, walk away, or, take extra risks. So this question tries to identify what do we do? What will be our reaction if we reach a certain stage with certain amount of money and we have an opportunity to increase our earning potential or just stay where we are and then move on. Potential responses to this will be say, okay, the 10,000, take the 10,000 and move on, run. Is that right? That's A response. B response, choose a path whereby 50% chance of winning an extra $50,000. Another possible response. C, perhaps take a 20% chance of winning $75,000. Or D, take a 5% chance of winning $100,000. And again, none of these is necessarily the best answer when you are responding to a question like this on your risk profile questionnaire. But whatever answer that you choose, again, will add to determining your risk profile or risk tolerance at that particular time. So that is the fifth sample question that we just gave. And out of this five sample questions, there could be more than that, but just illustrating five of them. Out of that, we may have one of four or five scenarios that could occur. Possible outcome. When you finish answering those questions, this could be the possible outcome of your risk tolerance depending on the response. You could be very defensive, or you could be defensive, or you could be conservative, or moderately aggressive, or very aggressive. Now, what this simply tells us is whether you are somebody that is risk tolerant or risk averse. What does that mean? Simple definition again is simply if you are very defensive, it means that you don't want to lose. You are somebody who is very, very, very conservative in terms of extreme side of that. You have less willingness to lose portion of your portfolio. Now, if you come out to be very aggressive in your evaluation after you answer the questionnaire, then potentially you may be someone that has much more risk tolerance when it comes to investing. So the idea here is it doesn't matter what your level of response comes out to be. You need to determine what is risk tolerance. Are you, and again, many factors will eventually sum up to give us what your risk tolerance is. It gives you a good idea to what degree are you willing to put money, how much are you willing to lose, potentially if that were to happen, and what your expected rewards or earnings for whatever you're investing in. This, my dear brothers and sisters, is a key important factor. We read a scripture early on, Luke telling us 14, that if somebody wants to build a project, a house, a tower, as Jesus illustrated, won't the person sit down to count the cost before they begin? Jesus Christ is seen a lot of times in scripture teaching spiritual principles or truth by using economics, money, as a way to illustrate, because many of us can easily relate to that. And I think that beyond the spiritual knowledge and teaching and lesson that Jesus often taught, there's really practical application that we could use. And today, I just wanted us to share a few things, flowing out from yesterday's subject on building our financial profile, that we could perhaps understand what it may take, what we want to, know what our personal risk profile is. So my question to you is, what is your risk profile? Do you know? Have you taken a risk profile test or risk tolerance test any time recently? If not, we give you the opportunity to be able to do that. Okay, we have the opportunity to give you the access to do that. You can call our office 720-588-9717. We'll set you up to, it's a free profile analysis that we'll give you, or you can go online to licenseconsultant.com/financial planning, and start a process. We'll get the sample risk tolerance questionnaire to you to evaluate, help you prepare. It's always a good thing to prepare before we are in the moment of trying to make a decision about investment. We don't want to be in a place whereby we are actually starting to make an investment and we are thinking through, oh, what's my risk tolerance on this investment I'm going to make? It'd be a good idea to have that in place already or know what it is. Again, every investment may be different, but that would be a good start for anyone to do that. So that's basically what I had to share today, and I trust it's going to help somebody. You can give us a call or go online to be able to start a process. Again, my name is Emmanuel Lyson, your certified financial educator. As I said earlier, before you implement any of these ideas, it's always a good thing to consult a tax professional, a financial professional, or a legal counsel before you implement these ideas. We are teaching, providing content to help us increase our knowledge base so we can walk in the blessing of the Lord and break through financially and be a blessing to the community, to our church, to the ministry, to the things we do and we love the most without being hindered financially, but being a blessing and using the tools God has given us to be a blessing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be back very, very soon. Be blessed.